Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this week's podcast. Here to talk with us today about goals and time management is our very special guest, Yannick Benjamin. So, Yannick is the co founder of an incredible organization called Wheeling Forward. The organization does some work to help individuals who are suffering with spinal cord injuries, mobility issues, and disabilities to provide advocacy and mentorship and other types of support that they may need to reach their goals, no matter how big or how small those might be. In addition to co-founding, as if that were not enough, his impactful organization also benefits from some of the incredible work that Yannick does as an advanced sommelier with the Court of Master Sommeliers. He's also been recognized as one of the top 40 under 40 within wine enthusiast community. And he's also completed several marathons across the country and was even named Person of the Year by New Mobility magazine in 2017. So hi, Yannick. We are so excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. So we just kind of walked through the incredible resume of accomplishments that you have under your belt. The first thing that I'd love to talk with you about and explore further is the organization. I'd love to know a little bit more about Wheeling Forward and how it came to be.
Yeah. Wheeling Forward it's a nonprofit. We are a 501c3 charity that was started in 2012. And the reason it came about was I was injured in a car accident that left me paralyzed in 2003. And I did my rehabilitation at Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. My roommate that I had met is and still a dear friend, Alex Olagudin, who he was also in a separate car accident on his way back to school at Carnegie Mellon. I'm a paraplegic, he's a quadriplegic. So paraplegic meaning that I'm paralyzed from the waist down, quadriplegic meaning that he's paralyzed from the chest down, so a higher level. And we have very similar backgrounds. He comes from a family of Russian immigrants, and I come from a family of French immigrants. And so we obviously had a lot in common and, same value system and all that kind of stuff. And one thing that we had noticed is on the same floor that we were on, other individuals who were also, whether in a car accident or an act of violence, whatever it may be, they simply didn't have the same kind of love, care, and support that you need to overcome these moments of tragedy. And we're like, and you start befriending these other individuals because, you'd always go to the rehab center to work out, and you obviously are developing these bonds. And, Alex and myself, we always had someone come visit us, uncle, aunt, cousin, friend, whatever it is. At 2 a.m, I could call someone and say, hey, can you get me a sandwich? I'm hungry. But these other individuals just didn't have that. The other thing that we had too was we obviously had our own anxieties about what the future held for us, what it was going to look like. But we knew that we were going to go back to our own homes because even though both Alex and myself don't come from like the wealthiest of families, but we had financial resources to do simple home modifications, making the doors wider, grab bars, maybe build a ramp if needed. These other individuals, were just going to nursing homes. Mm-hmm. And nursing homes are just like, for me, it's just a place you go to die, right? It's just like nothing happens there. Your brain atrophies. And that's what was happening to these individuals. It's like, but this is not fair. And so, Alex and I, it left a really bitter taste. Obviously, we were excited to leave, but we were just like, obviously we got struck with this terrible, situation of bad luck, but yet we're able to go back home. We're able to, maybe do other things and adapt to this new lifestyle. We do have the resources, and these individuals are just going to a nursing home just to be basically babysat. That's what happened. Right. And so as time went on, that was in 2003, I was just trying to figure things out. I was always in the hospitality industry, always worked in restaurants, but I had to we hear this word a lot now during the pandemic, the word pivot, but in 2003, right. I had to learn how to pivot. And Alex had to learn how to pivot because he was going to school for a degree in biomedical engineering, and he didn't have the use of his hands, so instead he pivoted and went to law school to learn how to become to law school. So eventually we obviously, we got involved with other nonprofits, volunteered our time, mentorship and all that. But we realized that we wanted to do our own thing, and that's how Wheeling Forward came about. And Wheeling Forward really has a strong emphasis and a strong focus on individuals that really are financially insecure, that don't have much money. Most of them are on Medicaid. And we realize, there's all these organizations that are all, I'm not obsessed, that's a terrible way of saying it, but are focused on trying to find a cure to paralysis.
Right.
But we're like, well, what about, simple things like, if someone doesn't have the strength to be on a manual chair, could we instead provide them with a power chair so they can get around easier? Or if it means that they can just, 4 steps, that's all it is, 4 steps for them to get in and out of their apartment or their house, and we can just build a ramp, which is just cost maybe a couple $100, maybe $1,000 at most. But if we can do that, that means they don't have to go to nursing home. So those are the things that we try to provide. Those are like the quality of life issues that I feel like sometimes are often taken for granted and forgotten. So that's what Wheeling Forward is all about.
That's incredible. How you guys kind of saw what was going on within this new community that you joined and took action. And speaking about action, I noticed that Wheeling Forward has this, I don't know if it's your official tagline, but I noticed this in your email signature and on your website, this phrase, empowering people with disabilities to achieve now. Can you tell us a little bit more about achieving now and what that means, and how does a person go about doing it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if I would say that I'm a nostalgic person. I definitely try to learn from my past, from past mistakes, but I'm also very you've got to move on and leave it in the past, and sometimes it's not an easy thing for a lot of people, and I get that. But kind of going back to what I was saying, a lot of organizations focus on the cure. You're always hearing the future, but what about now? What's happening now? And so what can we create, or what can we help to empower an individual to achieve their goals? So for example, if you're an iron worker, right, and you're passionate with construction and you got injured on the job, right? Now chances are you're never going to be able to do that. If you're a paraplegic like myself, it'll be a little complicated. But that doesn't mean that your world of being involved with architecture and design and construction is completely over. So you could be a contractor, but what resources could we help you achieve those goals? There's a lot of wonderful trade schools. Maybe we can look at government financial assistance, where you can apply and it would help you to pay for those trade schools. And if you don't want to deal with the headache of applying for that, maybe we know people that would help you do that. So those are the type of things, really trying to think outside the box and be as abstract as possible. And I do think that thinking in the present moment is very key, because, I do it myself too. It's always future, but it's always good to build towards a goal, but you've got to make sure that you're also taking care of what's currently present, happening now, and what's tangible.
That's awesome. And that really resonates, I think, with the work that we're doing at YOMAS as well, in terms of how you said, you're thinking about goals, so you're thinking about the future. So how do you take advantage of this present moment to set yourself up for those future goals? How do you personally, you've accomplished so much, how do you personally go about setting your goals and then meeting them?
I'm kind of old school, and I need to definitely modernize that, but I definitely make sure that, I write down tasks, and usually I'll do it the night before, and I'll just show you, something this is just a perfect example, all these lists. Awesome. And then I cross them out, and then I read you what's, what still has to be, what's left over, and then some new tasks, And that's what I try to do. And I certainly try to keep a certain routine and consistency um, every day. So that's also really helpful. And then I have my Google Calendar too as well, so I don't like overbook and I don't overextend myself. But yeah, I'm very much like kind of what you're saying. You know, trying to work in that present moment, because if you don't get things done at that present moment, then what's going to happen a few days later or in the future is just going to collapse.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious to know, right? Because you said like things can collapse, right? So you've done marathons. You started the organization. You are advanced sommelier. Like, how do you, when you have all of these, you're juggling all these different balls. You've got all these things going on, right? How do you assess whether or not you're still headed on the right track to like create an organization, open a restaurant? How do you know that you're like, do you have a process that you check in with yourself and say, am I doing the right things today
Yeah,
that are going to make me get to where I need to be tomorrow?
right. So I think the first thing that people have to learn how to say, and it's a word that I absolutely hate because my background is in hospitality, is but sometimes you just have to learn how to say no or I can't. So that's really important. So and like that, my mom always got on my case. My wife gets on my, she doesn't get on my case, but she reminds me, and she's right. Sometimes I just say yes, and sometimes you have to have the ability to say no. But I think the most important thing is, and something that I think most of us fall in this trap is when you start to forget things, oh my God, that becomes a problem, and then also your health. If you start
Mm.
realizing that you're waking up like super tired, or you're lethargic, you're not eating well, if your anxiety increases, then you've got to really reevaluate what's going on. Are you not working out enough? Are you not spending enough quality time with your family and friends? Are you not giving that moment to yourself of like breathing and just kind of like meditating, whatever that would mean? Meditating. I don't know. Like me personally, I wouldn't consider myself the most religious person, but
Hmm.
I still like to go sit in a church and just go like, oh, this feels nice, because the church forces me not to use technology, right? And now
Right.
I'm just kind of like, and so I have found that to be very helpful. But I think that if you start to see things, especially from a health perspective, not going so well, and that could mean anything. If you're like, are you getting like the flu more often? Are you getting headaches more often? More sadness, and mental health. That's really important. Then something is not going right. I think what's really important, and this is one thing that I always make sure, I love to work out, and that is the first and foremost priority for me to at least try to start my day off. Now, sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, but I need to work out. And so though you have to figure out whatever that priority is, whether it's like, I need that hour to paint or just write, whatever it is, you need to set that aside and make that your priority.
No, that makes a lot of sense. At Yomas, we talk about this principle in like time management and like things that successful people do to just stay on top of everything, and it's called the production and production capability. And it's
Yeah.
basically this principle that like if you don't take care of like yourself, because you are like your vessel, and your ability to produce is going to suffer. So unless you're taking care of yourself and giving yourself that time to rest, to relax, then I mean everything else is just kind of going to fall apart. So do you actively like block off time in your calendars and stuff to like work out or to like go sit at church, or do you just try to like fit it into your calendar where possible?
Absolutely. And I probably started doing that religiously and more consistently, I would say 5 years ago.
Oh.
Before it would be like, you'd call me up, hey, Yannick, can we get on a phone? And I just say, yeah, sure, no problem. But now it's just like things have gotten so busy and so insane that I have to book it. I have to put it in the calendar. And sometimes I forget, but yeah, I
Hmm.
have to like, and usually like what'll end up happening, let's say you and I like, let's say you call me up and you say, hey, can we get on the phone from like 9 to 9:30? Instead of that, I will book usually like 8:50 to about 10 o'clock. So I give myself that 10 minutes before, and then even though I know that I'll probably have 20 minutes free after, but at least I know, and then it just gives me a few minutes to decompress before I go on to the next task. Unless sometimes there's dear exceptions to the rules, but I do like to like kind of block off an hour, even though I know it's just 30 minutes.
That's really smart. I didn't think about that, how sometimes you just need to give yourself a moment in between activities
Yeah,
for yourself to like reset
for
and
sure.
collect yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe you want to just read a quick article on the New York Times or whatever, watch something stupid on YouTube. So it's just kind of like, then you go on. And I think that's also really important as well.
That's really cool. I haven't thought about that. I might actually give that a shot instead of like hoarding all of my personal time at the end of the day, maybe giving myself little bits of it throughout.
Yeah, little increments.
That's awesome. You also mentioned like you mentioned uncertainty before, right? The amount of uncertainty that came with like you know learning that you became a paraplegic in the hospital, and the uncertainty that came with that. And now, I think there's a very universal issue where we're all kind of feeling everything's uncertain.
Absolutely.
um we've been talking a lot about that at Yomas as well, like what do you do with uncertainty and the anxiety that brings forward. How do you go about kind of mitigating like anxiety and when you're embarking on all of these different
Right.
goals, like how do you work yourself through, like, all right, there's a lot of uncertainty, I'm getting anxious, how do you kind of deal with that?
Yeah, I would be the world's biggest liar if I told you that there are not moments where I'm super anxious, right? I mean, I internalize it, I hold it in, so you would not notice it. But there are times with someone that I feel very comfortable with to express myself, like Heidi, my wife. She can feel it. She's like, "What's wrong? Like, why?" And with the anxiety aspects of it, I would say I mean, especially after my accident in 2003, since you mentioned it, there was, I would say, from '04 to about '06. I mean, the anxiety that I had was awful. I was bombarded with medical bills. I was trying to figure out who I was, trying to find this new identity because, I was this 6'2", 6'3" white guy, right? And, I never but it's true, I had, listen, looking back, not that I ever took advantage of it, but things came easy, right? In many ways, right? It just did, right? Um, and I was a physical force. I was in good shape. So things like that I took for granted then, like just simply grabbing a coffee cup, that now I have to like, Heidi, can you get that coffee cup for me?
Right.
Um, and even just the way I looked,
It's different.
probably was advantageous for
Right,
sure. It
right.
just the reality. And now all of a sudden, here I am in this wheelchair, right? And then people have certain judgments. Maybe
Mm,
we call that ableism.
right.
Can he actually really do this? And listen, for the most part, I've had only good experiences. But the anxieties that I had back then, and trying to figure out who I was and what I was going to do and who I was going to be, were just like very high. And dealing with insurances. And so, how did I deal with that? I think like I wouldn't say that I had an exact method, but I did go see a therapist. And I completely benefited from it. It was the greatest thing that I could have done. And I wish I went to go see them earlier, and just kind of putting it all out on the table. And I felt so beneficial. I mean, I wish I could see a therapist right now, sometimes, but
Yeah.
and I guess there's no excuse because you can do it on Zoom just like we're doing it now. But therapy was, I mean, I completely advocate for it, and I loved every second of it. It was really beneficial. But for me now, like what helps with my anxiety, working out, and I do a lot of breathing exercises.
Mm,
Breathing has been just like completely like, I do like these kind of like meditation, whatever it is. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I'm talking to someone, right? And that has been very helpful as well too. And it could be anything. It could be something, an inspirational story that I'm going to read that takes about 5 minutes. It could be it could be some kind of prayer, whether it's a Buddhist prayer, an Islamic prayer, a prayer, a Jewish prayer. It doesn't make a difference. But, those, I find them to be very enlightening and very positive and very fulfilling, and a reminder to be kind and to be good, and not to take this moment that you've been blessed with for granted. And so that's what I try to do. But listen, I get it. I mean, even myself, my anxiety is very different now than it was 7 months ago.
I hear that. I hear that. I mean, that definitely resonates with me. I think there's with the pandemic, it's really hard to kind of think ahead, right? The things that maybe, like for me, for instance, I love to travel. I live for it. Like I need to travel at least twice a year, go meet different people, absorb new cultures, eat different foods. And so right now it's like hard because I don't know when will be the next time that I'll be able to enjoy that. But, things like you mentioned, like understanding what your priorities are, and like understanding, and I guess knowing yourself, getting to know yourself, and dialing into like, what are the things that I need? Like I realize I love to cycle. And if I don't cycle at least 3 times a week, I start to realize I'm like in a bad mood. I'm not myself. I go for a 2-hour ride. I come home and I'm like a different person. My husband encourages me. He's like, please go for a bike ride. I think you need a bike ride. So I 100% hear you on that, and like taking advantage of those moments, and just finding, like, remembering to breathe and remembering to check in and kind of meditate, whatever that means, right? Whatever that meditation means.
Make it your own. Make it your own.
Exactly. I was also chatting with our founder, Duran, last week about what have been some of like the biggest lessons that he's learned throughout his like professional career. He actually talked about like, uncertainty, and like there's a lot of uncertainty with like creating a startup. And so for him, the biggest lesson has been like, you can't control the future. You don't have control over the future. The anxiety is going to happen, and then you just need to, you need to acknowledge it and move and keep moving. What has been, I think, one of like the biggest like lessons, professional or personal lessons that, you've learned that you'd love to share with people who are truly trying to like meet goals and really become the best, most effective version of themselves? What would you say to them?
Well, the first thing I would say is, and I think this is probably an issue with most of us. I mean, I fell into that trap, but you have to be prepared. Tragedy will always happen, right? And just like, family members die, friends, it's a part of life that completely sucks.
I would love to know from you, like, what you feel from where you sit, and from your experiences working on different projects, how you go about trying to drive like effective teamwork and ensuring that like everyone is kind of working together towards a common goal. It's not always easy working with different people with different opinions and perspectives.
Sure.
How do you try to drive some like effective teamwork?
Well, I think, delegating responsibilities, positive reinforcement, right? Micromanaging is never the way to go. I mean, maybe it works for some other, but I think, if I would say, hey, Victoria, can you, here's a project for you. Can you get this done? Thank you so much. I don't know, but just trying to like recognize people's strengths and then working with that. But, just being as transparent as possible. And then also like, if there's certain talents that you may have, or certain resources that you may share them with your colleagues, that also motivates them. I mean, I worked for a guy for like almost 11 years, and he owned a wine store. And I wouldn't say that he was purposely selfish. That's not the case. But like, it was really just a job. And I got a lot out of it, but because I took the initiative to kind of do my own thing. But there wasn't one thing that I learned from him. What I did learn was like things not to do that he did, right? But like, as far as like I never had that conversation with him. Like, how did you build this business? How did you get investors? What did you do? How did you go about that? Like, how did you create your financial deck? Never learned any of those things. So I think, like, sharing your resources, and I think the more you do so, the more that motivates them, and the more loyalty that also builds, right? Because they're like, well, if you believe in me and you're sharing that, then I'm going to want to help you even more, because if you're successful and you empower me to be more successful, then this whole brand will be successful. And it's a great little thing that can happen. And so, listen, he was a great guy, but he was a terrible boss in that
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I 100% agree with that. I think sometimes people forget what the benefit of sharing and like reciprocity, what the value is of that, and how
Exactly. Well said.
everyone can win. It's possible. We can all win.
Exactly. Absolutely.
But yeah, Yannick, this really, I think this really concludes our chat for today. I want to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Again, sharing is such a key. Um, and yeah, we just really appreciate you coming on board and having a chat with us.
Thank you so much. This was really a pleasure and an honor.